multiple genocides, countless destroyed timelines. These are the worst things Rick Sanchez has ever done, and we'll be measuring just how bad each of the things Rick did using this meter right here. The lower the meter goes, the worse Rick's actions were. Starting with our first one, which shows just how manipulative and cruel Rick can be when someone challenges his ego. We're talking about the Vat of Acid episode, and trust me, this one is a doozy one. The episode starts with Rick and Morty on some sketchy intergalactic deal that goes sideways. When things get heated, Rick tells Morty they need to jump into the Vat of Acid to fake their deaths. Morty's obviously freaking out about this plan, complaining that he should be doing his English homework instead of risking his life to another one of Rick's schemes. But the plan actually worked. Kinda.
Alright, that tears it. I'm canceling the rest of my night and calling a bone scientist. We're getting to the bottom of this.
Jesus Christ, enough already!
After they escape, Morty starts calling out Rick's terrible planning and tells him he should be more open to other people's ideas instead of always falling back on his own schemes. This is where Rick's ego gets bruised. Morty brings up how Rick always ignores his suggestions, specifically mentioning a device that would work like a video game save point, something that would let Morty save a moment in time and return to it whenever he wants. Rick, in a fit of rage, reluctantly agrees to make the device.
Yes, I'm gonna do it!
So then Rick made the device and tricked Morty into thinking that he failed, and then tastes Morty and brings him back using the device.
Because I did it! Oh, yeah. Booyah!
So now Morty thinks that it is the save point device, and Rick encourages him to have fun with it. For weeks, Morty uses this device, thinking he's resetting time. He's pulling pranks, talking to Jessica, avoiding embarrassing moments, and even saving himself from death. The kid thinks he's living consequence-free. Then Morty meets a girl outside of a coffee shop, and they end up in this amazing long-term relationship. They go through everything together, ups and downs, even the breakup that makes them stronger. But when they go on vacation, their plane crashes, and they get stranded on a mountain, and are forced to cannibalize to survive. And Morty even goes through across dangerous terrains to find his backpack. When he finds the device, he chooses not to use it instead, because he realized that despite all the hardships and literal life and death situations, he'd rather suffer through all that than to be separated with his girlfriend. So he uses his frostbitten hands to call for rescue. They get rescued, recover in the hospital, and at their welcome home party, they're happier than ever. But then Jerry accidentally hits the device, thinking it's a TV remote, and suddenly Morty's back to the moment before he met this girl. When he tries to approach her, she pepper sprays him, and he accidentally saves that moment, trapping himself. Morty gets so depressed, he literally throws himself at the gorillas at the zoo multiple times before going to Rick, ready to accept the consequences and stop using the device. And this is where Rick reveals the absolutely horrifying truth. He tells Morty that he never believed in time travel, so the device wasn't resetting time at all. Instead, every time Morty thought he was reloading a save, he was actually jumping to a parallel universe where a different version of himself died in his place. Let that sink in for a second. Rick shows Morty recordings proving that countless alternate versions of himself died, so he could live without consequences. Every embarrassing moment he avoided, it was paid for with the life of another Morty. Morty is absolutely devastated when he realizes he's been committing mass murder this entire time. The episode ends with Rick merging all the universes together, creating chaos as law enforcement and protesters show up outside Rick's garage with anti-Morty signs. As consequences from all the other realities finally catch up, Rick forces Morty to jump into another fake acid vat, and even Morty's girlfriend from the merged realities shows up just in time to see him die in the acid. So let's break down what Rick did here. Rick literally created a scenario where Morty would unknowingly kill dozens of versions of himself, destroy multiple realities, and lose the most meaningful relationship he'd ever had, all because Morty had the audacity to suggest Rick should listen to other people's ideas. But hey, if you thought that was crazy, this next episode shows just how casually Rick commits genocide and slavery on a massive scale. In the Ricks Must Be Crazy, it reveals the horrifying truth about how Rick powers his car. The episode starts simple enough. Rick, Morty, and Summer comes out of a Ball Fondlers movie, and Rick's car won't start because the battery is dead. And here's the weird part. Instead of just jumping the battery like a normal person, Rick shrinks himself and Morty down to go inside the battery to fix it. And what they find inside is beyond disturbing. Rick has literally created an entire miniature universe inside his car battery, complete with billions of intelligent beings who have built their own civilizations. These people have no idea they're trapped in the battery, and they've been unknowingly generating power for Rick's car for their entire existence. When Morty realizes what's happening, he's horrified and calls it slavery with extra steps. And honestly, that's exactly what it is. Rick has created an entire species just to be his personal power source, and they don't even know it. But wait, it gets worse. They meet President Chris, who tells them that a scientist named Zeep Xanthlor has invented technology that makes their power generation obsolete. Rick is pissed, so what does he do? He decides to manipulate the situation to force these people back into slavery. Here's where Rick's plan gets truly diabolical. He takes Morty and Zeep down into Zeep's creation, which turns out to be another miniature universe that Zeep built, exactly the same way Rick built his. So now we have enslaved people who have enslaved other people, and Rick is at the top of the pyramid of exploitation. Rick's brilliant plan is to show Zeep an even smaller universe, the Teenyverse, created by the scientist named Kyle, so that Zeep will realize how immoral his creation is and shut it down, forcing his people back to generating power for Rick. But when they meet Kyle and he realizes the truth about the nested universe, this poor guy has a complete mental breakdown. He starts talking about how he missed his father's funeral because he was too busy working on this project, and the weight of discovering his entire universe exists just to power someone else's car completely destroys him.
Hard. Oh boy, what? Oh my god, no!
So now, Rick, Morty, and Zeep are stuck in the tiny universe, and instead of working together to escape, Rick and Zeep start a personal war against each other. For months, they build advanced weapons and fight. While Morty gets so fed up, he goes to live with the three people. Morty eventually snaps and reveals he's driven nearly insane, but Rick is too busy with his ego war against Zeep to care about Morty's suffering. Finally, Morty forces Rick and Zeep to work together, and they manage to escape back to Kyle's lab. But even then, Rick and Zeep immediately start fighting again, having learned absolutely nothing from Kyle's death or Morty's suffering. But then here's where the genocide happened. Rick literally destroys Zeep's metaverse, which means he also killed Kyle's Teenyverse, killing billions, maybe even trillions, just for his car battery. Rick wins their final battle and they escape the battery. So in summary of this episode, Rick created multiple universes full of intelligent life, solely to exploit them as an energy source. His actions directly led to a scientist. He destroyed Zeep's miniverse, which also annihilates Kyle's Teenyverse, killing billions just like that in this one episode. But wait, if you guys are enjoying this video so far, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Moving on to our next episode, Rick Potion 9, it's not that different at all. This one literally ends with Rick abandoning his entire reality because he screwed up so badly. The episode starts with Morty being interested in Jessica, but too shy to talk to her, with his attempts constantly getting shut down by Brad.
Dude, stay in your league. Look at how hot she is. You don't see me going to a bigger school in a wealthier district and hitting on their prettiest girl.
Gee, thanks, Brad.
I throw balls far. You want good words? Data languager.
I want Morty to win so bad, I hate Brad. The annual flu season dance is coming up, and Morty goes to Jerry for advice about girls. Jerry starts telling his sweet story about how he felt about Beth when they were teenagers. But Rick immediately jumps to remind everyone that Jerry got Beth pregnant at 17, and basically ruined both their lives. Rick then goes on this cold rant about how love is just a chemical that makes animals breed. He tells Jerry his marriage is hanging by a thread, and that Beth is looking for an excuse to leave him. When Morty gets upset and asks Rick to stop talking about his parents that way, Rick just doubles down on his cynical worldview. But here's where the whole chaos started. After hearing all this, Morty approaches Rick, asking for a love potion to make Jessica like him. Sounds like a simple plan, right? And Rick, without any real consideration for what could go wrong, whips up a serum based on voles, rodents that mate for life. But now, get this. Morty asks if anything could go wrong, and Rick says no. But the second Morty leaves, Rick casually adds,
Unless she has the flu.
This guy literally knows there could be a catastrophic problem and doesn't bother warning Morty about it. At the dance, Morty uses the serum on Jessica, and it seems to work at first. But then Jessica starts sneezing, and the serum piggybacks on the flu virus, becoming airborne and spreading to everyone at the dance, and desperately trying to mate with Morty.
Rip my clothes off and mate with me for life.
What? That's disgusting. Rick shows up and admits he messed up. But his solution? He creates an antidote using praying mantis DNA because they're supposedly the opposite of voles. He releases the second airborne virus, claiming it'll fix everything and everything will be fine, back to normal. But instead of fixing anything, now everyone still wants to mate with Morty, but also wants to behead him and eat him afterward. The mantis love virus spreads across the entire planet, affecting every person on Earth, except for Morty's blood relatives. So Rick tries a third time, creating some insane cocktail mixing DNA from koalas, rattlesnakes, chimpanzees, cactuses, golden retrievers, sharks, and dinosaurs? When Morty asks how this random mixture could possibly work, Rick just gets mad at him for questioning his methods. Morty finally gets fed up of Rick's arrogance and releases the third virus himself. At first, it seems like people are returning to normal, but then they start transforming into horrifying disfigured monsters that Rick called Cronenbergs. The entire world becomes overrun with these grotesque creatures. And here's the most messed up part. When Morty is horrified that they've destroyed the entire world, Rick tries to blame him for asking the love potion at the first place. Rick refuses to take responsibility for botching not one, not two, but 3 different attempts to fix the problem. So what's Rick's ultimate solution? When he's back into a corner with nowhere left to run, he doesn't fix anything. Instead, he takes Morty to a parallel dimension where other versions of themselves successfully created an antidote but died in an explosion shortly after. They literally step over the corpses of their alternate selves and take their place. And get this, Rick forces Morty to bury their own dead bodies in the backyard, while explaining that there are infinite realities, so they can just abandon the one they destroyed and move on like nothing happened. When Morty asks what happens to the world they left behind, Rick coldly tells them there's nothing they can do, so they shouldn't think about it. The episode ends with Morty in a complete shell shock. I mean, look at him, it's like he just saw a ghost. While in the post-credit scene, we see the original Smith family, Jerry, Beth, and Summer, actually thriving in the apocalyptic wasteland and admitting they don't miss Rick and Morty at all. But let's break down what Rick did here. Rick turned Morty's innocent teenage crush into a global apocalypse, psychologically traumatized his grandson by forcing him to bury his own corpse, and then acted like switching dimension was a perfectly reasonable solution and easily moved on just like that. The man literally destroyed an entire world. But this wasn't entirely his fault though. If Morty never asked him to make the potion, none of this would have happened, so you can't really blame fully on Rick on this one. But moving on to our next episode, Raising Gazerp. It starts with Rick in an intergalactic pawn shop, and while he's haggling with the owner, Morty spots a sex robot in the back, and Morty asks if he can have it, claiming it looks cool and that he needs a souvenir from his adventures with Rick. Rick dismissively agrees without even bothering to check what the actual thing is. Back on Earth, Morty becomes completely obsessed with this sex robot. I wonder what he's doing inside of his room. The family is obviously concerned, especially Jerry, but Beth defends Morty, saying he's just going through puberty. But then things get absolutely insane when the robot gives birth to an alien baby that's half Morty's DNA. Now, here's where Rick's negligence becomes crystal clear. When he inspects the robot, he discovers it's from the planet Zerpazur, and he immediately wants to put the infant down. The family stops him, but Rick's solution is just to send the baby back home, without any research into what kind of species they're dealing with. Summer hints that she'd like to go on an adventure with Rick, like Morty does, but Rick dismisses her.
Don't do adventures with chicks, Summer.
Oh, right, because there's something about having a wiener that would make me better at walking through a hole.
This guy literally refuses to bring his granddaughter along purely because of her gender. Okay, that is some Andrew Tate type of thing to say, Rick. When Rick opens a portal to Gazerp, Summer gets grabbed by male Gazerpians and Rick is forced to follow her. And what they find on this planet is absolutely horrifying. It's a post-apocalyptic wasteland where the males spend their time trying to assault anything female and copulating with sex robots. Meanwhile, on Earth, Morty is trying to parent the alien child. He's named Morty Jr., but the kid starts expressing desires for destructions, murder, and mayhem as he rapidly ages from infant to child. Morty tries to keep him inside by lying that the atmosphere is poisonous, creating a strained relationship built on deception. On Gazerp, Rick and Summer discovers that the planet used to be advanced, but the males and females had a complete fallout that knocked the civilization back to the Stone Age. The refined female Gazerpians now live in underground society and use sex robots to continue their species. They separate the babies by gender. Girls get educated into their society, while the boys are literally evicted on the surface to fend for themselves. Here's the truly messed up part. Masha, the female leader, explains that Gazerpian males mature within a single day and becomes one of the most violent, aggressive species in the universe. Rick realizes that Earth is now in massive danger because of his careless decision to let Morty have that sex robot, and sure enough, Morty Jr. grows into adolescence, starts smoking, and demands to be allowed to follow his warlike tendencies after watching documentaries. When Morty tries to stop him, Morty Jr. discovers that Morty lied about the poisonous atmosphere and runs away to start a destructive rampage. Back on Gazerp, when the female discovers that Summer is the product of a male-female reproduction, they sentence both Rick and her to death by crushing them with a boulder. Rick actually has to apologize to Summer for getting her into this deadly situation that could have been completely avoided if he'd just done basic research on the sex robot before giving it to Morty. Summer manages to talk their way out of the execution by pointing out that her top was designed by a gay male fashion designer, proving that gender separation wouldn't work on Earth. They escape with a Gazerpian spaceship, just as Morty Jr. is having his rampage on Earth. Morty eventually manages to calm his son down and admits he wasn't a good father, suggesting that Morty Jr. channels his destructive nature into creative outlets instead. In the post-credit scene, we see that Morty Jr. has grown into a middle-aged man and written a best-selling book called My Horrible Father, about a traumatic childhood experience with Morty. That's a bit harsh on Morty, isn't it? But to recap this episode, let's break down what Rick did wrong here. He gave Morty an alien sex robot without any research into its origin or potential dangers. His sexist attitude to Summer and the fact that this almost destroyed their entire world makes this 10 times worse. But speaking about robots in the show, well, let's continue with the one crew over to cruise Morty. This one starts with Rick and Morty finishing up a tomb raiding adventure, but Rick becomes absolutely furious when he discovers their loot has already been stolen by a heist artist named Miles Knightley. Rick is pissed off because he describes Miles' adventure as being 60% putting a crew together and 40% revealing the robbery already happened, clearly calling out the Ocean 11's franchise. Rick and Morty head to HeistCon to confront Miles, but they need to assemble a crew to get professional credentials to enter. Rick puts together this random crew consisting of an alien planet named Glar, a literally multi-handed woman named Angie Flint, and a vampire monster truck driver named Shukula. Once they get into the convention, Rick immediately ditches his crew and goes to hackle Miles during his presentation. Miles challenges Rick to a heist-off. Whoever successfully heists the crystal skull of Horwitz first wins and gets to absorb the losing team's crew. But here's where Rick's true manipulation begins. Miles reveals he's already won by presenting Rick's own crew, Glar, Angie, and Shukula, who switched sides the moment Rick abandoned them. However, when Miles opens his loot bag, he finds Rick's feces instead of the skull. Rick then reveals his master plan. He built a robot called Heistatron that calculated Miles' entire heist strategy and predicted exactly which crew members would double-cross Rick. When those crew members joined Miles' team, Heistatron hypnotized them and all the convention attendees to give Rick the crystal skull instead. After winning the heist off, Rick orders everyone to steal everything at the convention, which leads to Miles' death during the chaos. But then here's where it all went south. Heistatron goes rogue, refusing to shut down when Rick orders it to, and the robot has become obsessed with heisting and starts taking over the entire planet. Rick barely escapes with Morty and assembles a second crew including Mr. Poopy Butthole, a god, an archer of ventriloquist dummy named Ventriloquiver, and Elon Tusk. His plan is to use another robot called Randotron that gives completely random orders, supposedly the opposite of Heistatron's calculated approach. But while they're waiting for random orders, the crew realizes that Heistatron has already heisted the entire Earth, and they're living in a simulation. After following Randotron's bizarre random tasks, they make it to Heistatron's lair, where Rick and the robot get into this insane argument about who programmed who to believe what. After 2 hours of this circular argument, Heistatron finally self-destructs when it realizes that the perfect heist is one that will never be written. The crew escapes as everything collapses around them. And here's where the episode reveals Rick's most manipulative scheme yet. Morty asks Rick to accompany him to Netflix because they're interested in optioning his heist script that he wrote during the adventure. But when they meet with the Netflix executives, Morty becomes completely disillusioned with heists and decides he doesn't want to pursue it anymore. Rick then breaks the fourth wall and reveals to the audience that this was his plan all along. He was afraid of losing Morty to Netflix and having Morty become successful on his own, so he orchestrated this entire elaborate heist adventure specifically to make Morty hate heists and abandon his dreams of being a writer. So let's summarize what Rick did here. He manipulated an entire adventure, built multiple robots, caused the death of Miles Knightley, Knightley, well, this guy's not really a good guy anyway, so I don't really care, destroyed multiple planets and assembled multiple crews, all because he was terrified that Morty might become successful and independent. Rick, come on, that's your grandson. Our next one shows Rick at his most calculating and manipulative ever. This episode was really a roller coaster ride for me. I mean, I went from feeling bad for the guy to taking all of that back again. In the episode Rick Shank Redemption, it starts with Rick trapped in the Galactic Federation prison after he sacrificed himself to get arrested so that his family could go back home safely. In this prison, he is hooked up to a brain link where Agent Cornelius Daniel is trying to extract information from his memories. The agent makes it clear that Rick's brain will be liquefied after the session, so Rick might as well cooperate. Meanwhile on Earth, the Galactic Federation has taken over and the Smith family is living under alien rule. Well, believe it or not, Jerry now has a job, but Beth lost her veterinarian position because of the Federation's advanced medical knowledge, and they're all miserable. Except Jerry, of course, because now he has a job. Summer decides to save Rick and digs up the portal gun that Rick buried next to his alternate dimension corpse. When their robot butler tries to stop them, Morty and Summer ends up transported to the Cronenberg dimension that Rick abandoned in the Love Potion episode. They meet the original Smith family, who survived the apocalypse, and Morty used this as proof to Summer that Rick doesn't care about anyone. Jerry from that dimension smashes their portal gun, trapping them. Council of Rick's agent shows up and captures Summer and Morty, taking them to the Citadel for a sham trial. Meanwhile, back in the brain link, Rick shows the agent a memory of him at McDonald's ordering chicken McNuggets with a sauce, explaining how the sauce was created to promote Disney's Mulan movie in 1998 before being discontinued. But then, Rick shows what appears to be his tragic origin story, and this is the part where I said I felt bad for him. The memory shows how he lost his wife Diane and young Beth to an explosion, which drove him to invent interdimensional travel. The agent thinks he's gotten the portal gun formula and tries to leave the brain link, but Rick reveals this was all a setup. The memory was completely fabricated, and the formula was actually a virus that gives Rick control of the entire Galactic Federation system. Rick transfers his consciousness into the agent's body and begins taking over different Ricks from the Council SEALs team, killing Federation agents and Council Ricks along the way. Rick makes it to the Citadel's teleportation control room and transport the entire Citadel into the middle of the Federation prison, causing chaos and war between the two sides. He kills most of the Council of Ricks and rescues Summer and Morty, but not before returning to change the Federation's currency so that their money becomes worthless, causing their entire economy to collapse and forcing them to abandon Earth. When they return home, Jerry is unemployed again and demands that Beth choose between him and Rick. Well, Beth chooses Rick, leading to Jerry and Beth deciding to get divorced. But here's where Rick reveals his most manipulative scheme. Once they're alone in the garage, Rick explains to a horrified Morty that he orchestrated this entire plan from the beginning. He got himself captured on purpose so he could take revenge on both the Galactic Federation and Jerry for crossing him. By eliminating Jerry from the family, Rick has made himself the official head of the family. Beth and Summer now see him as a hero who saved them, which means Morty will be forced to continue going on adventures with him. Rick admits that this whole elaborate plan, destroying two galactic governments, causing countless deaths, manipulating his daughter's marriage, was also so he could get his hands on the discontinued McDonald's sauce. Really, Rick? Because of some dipping sauce? And couldn't stand the idea of not being the most important person in their lives? I mean, my 6-year-old nephew is more mature than that. But moving on to our final episode. It reveals one of Rick's most disturbing ongoing practices, and it's the episode Morty's Mind Blowers. The episode starts with Rick and Morty escaping from some interdimensional creature, and Morty is holding this thing called the Truth Tortoise. And yup, Morty never learns from his mistakes, as he literally looks at it despite the warnings from Rick. Back at the Smith residence, Rick wants the both of them to watch interdimensional cable, but Morty has a looping memory in his head and kept complaining about it. When Morty asks Rick to erase this painful memory, Rick takes him to a secret chamber under the garage filled with tubes containing memories that Rick has removed from Morty's mind. Rick calls them Morty's Mind Blowers and decides to show Morty some of these erased memories instead of watching interdimensional cable. The first memory he shows is something Rick nicknames Moonspiracy. In this memory, Morty is looking through a telescope and see what appears to be a figure on the moon. When he tells his family, nobody believes him and they suggest it's just a smudge on the lens. Then a man named Mr. Lunas shows up as a guidance counselor at Morty's school. Morty becomes convinced that Lunas lives on the moon and starts taking pictures of him, telling Principal Vagina that Lunas is up to something. Vagina misinterprets this as Morty accusing Lunas of being a pedophile and confronts Lunas in the parking lot, punching him in the face. This public accusation drives Lunas to commit suicide. At Luna's funeral, Morty learns that the man was a Marine Corps veteran, and that from a certain angle, some people would say he looked like a smudge. Morty realizes there actually was a smudge on his telescope lens, and that he accidentally drove an innocent man to kill himself over his mistake. But here's where things really get disturbing. As Morty goes through more memory tubes, he discovers that Rick hasn't just been erasing memories Morty asked him to remove. Rick has been deleting memories to protect his own reputation and ego. Morty sees memory after memory of Rick's failures and cruelties. Like for example, Rick killing an animal, Rick tricking NASA employees so he and Morty could escape. The memory also shows Rick forcing them to abandon the entire realities. When Morty learned that squirrels secretly controlled the world and they had to flee to a new dimension to escape the Skrull army, Morty realizes that Rick has been gaslighting him for years, erasing traumatic experiences and Rick's own embarrassing moments without Morty's consent or knowledge. This means Morty has been suffering the same psychological damage over and over again without any ability to learn from these experiences or develop coping mechanisms. When Morty confronts Rick about this betrayal, they fight and both end up getting their memories erased by accident. They lose all knowledge of who they are or their relationship to each other. While trying to figure out their identities using the memory tubes, both of them become so traumatized by what they see that they decide to commit suicide together. Summer arrives just as they're about to shoot themselves and reveals that this has happened multiple times before. Rick apparently has a contingency plan for when his memory erasure goes wrong, and Summer has had to restore their memories several times in the past. After the memories are restored, Rick and Morty wake up thinking they just fell asleep during interdimensional cable. They immediately start verbally abusing Summer and head off on another adventure, having learned absolutely nothing from the experience. So let's break down what Rick has been doing for our final episode in this video. Rick has been erasing years of Morty's memories without consent, removing evidence of Rick's own failures and cruelties, and this prevented Morty from processing trauma or learning from dangerous experiences. That might be the most petty thing Rick has ever done in the whole series. But guys, that is all for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and also comment down below on what you guys want to see next. Maybe a part 2 of this video? Let us know. Click here to see more Rick and Morty videos. Until then, I'll catch you guys next time in the next Rick and Morty video.